Welcome to my channel. Sit back and listen to the best true crime stories. Let's go. Despite the large number of mass murders in the world, especially in Western countries and most of all in the United States, it is very rare to hear about an armed psychopath committing a shooting at an airport. This is obviously due to the fact that the airport is very inconvenient as a hunting ground for hunters of their own kind due to the increased level of security and high density of armed guards, which can prevent and quickly stop the massacre, neutralizing, or even killing the aggressor himself and preventing him from destroying a large number of victims. A large international airport is a city within a city with its rigid structure, in which several tens of thousands of people are employed. Those who have watched cycles of documentaries about the work of security services of different international airports of the world know that there are not only simple security guards, as in colleges or supermarkets, but also armed police, sappers, and other units for all possible cases of life and death. So while some hotheads have opened fire on people at the airport, those incidents are rare and usually only killed a small number of people. It would be surprising if no such incident occurred at a place as popular as Los Angeles International Airport, which is the second busiest in the United States after John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City, and the fourth busiest in the world, and ranks first in the world in terms of the number of appointments and departures, that is, the point where people begin or end their journey rather than transferring to another flight. There have been 2 incidents of people being shot at this airport. In one of them, 2 victims were killed, in the other only 1. There were also wounded. First case, July 4, 2002. Hesham Mohammed Hedayat was born in Egypt on July 4, 1961. The devout Muslim was born on U.S. Independence Day and will subsequently commit his crime on this day, on his birthday, and on the holy holiday for every American patriot. He will shoot Israeli airline customers, most of whom are Jews. But he did not belong to Islamic terrorist groups. He denied it himself, and no evidence of it has been found, although many thought so at first. By the time he moved to the U.S. in 1992, Hedayat was married. He immigrated with his family on a tourist visa. With his wife Hala, they had a 1-year-old child. Already in the U.S., a second child was born, and at the time of the crime in 2002, the couple had 2 sons, Adam, 7 years old, and Omar, 12 years old. They lived in the city of Irvine southeast of Los Angeles. Hedayat had a green card, which allowed him to live in the country and have a work permit, and he worked as a limousine driver. However, immediately after his arrival, he asked for political asylum. He wanted to become a political immigrant. He cited persecution by the Egyptian authorities for his religious beliefs under the pretext that he was allegedly a terrorist. As he himself told the interview, he was arrested in Egypt and falsely accused of belonging to Al-Jama'ah al-Islamiyah, also known as the Islamic group, which has claimed responsibility for some acts of violence in Egypt. Also in his asylum application, Hedayat wrote that he was a member of the Asad Ibn Furat Mosque Association, which aimed to truly understand and apply Islamic law in the 20th century under all circumstances. He noted that he had been tortured and had body scars and medical certificates to prove it. The bureaucratic red tape lasted several years because there were so many applications. Hedayat was rejected. 3 years later, in 1995, he was denied political asylum, but managed to stay in the country with a temporary work permit. And in 1997, his wife won the visa lottery for an immigrant visa, allowing the family to become legal residents and obtain permanent residency in the United States. As the Immigration and Naturalization Service later reported, they did not consult with the Egyptian government because they feared for the safety of Hedayat's family in Egypt. A spokesman said it was a dilemma to either put people at risk or be concerned about national security. The FBI and CIA checked his identity, but the INS did not give these agencies the information from his asylum application. On his 41st birthday, July 4, 2002, at approximately 11:30 a.m., Hedayat, armed with 2 Glock pistols, spare magazines, and a knife with a 6-inch blade, went to Los Angeles International Airport, Thomas Bradley Terminal. There, he walked up to the LL ticket counter, in front of which a line of 10 people had gathered. Another 80 were already in their seats on the plane, which had been delayed on the ground, pulled out a .45 caliber pistol and opened fire. He first killed the airline ticket counter operator, 25-year-old Victoria Hin. He then turned toward the passengers, who began panicking and scattering, and began shooting at them. The second victim who died was Yakov Aminov, 46, a North Hollywood neighborhood resident and diamond salesman. He did not die immediately, but later died during surgery after suffering a single severe gunshot wound. According to loved ones, Aminov was not a passenger himself, but had brought a friend to the airport. Aminov was the father of 8 children, 2 from his first marriage and 5 from his second with his wife Anat. When it became known that he had died in hospital from his injuries, his wife Anat, pregnant with his 6th child, fainted. 4 others, including one 61-year-old woman, were wounded. Hedayat managed to fire 10 shots before being knocked down by an unarmed security guard. Security officer Haim Sapir came to the guard's aid and began to subdue the perpetrator. Another passenger also decided to help and joined in. The terrorist, who did not want to give up, pulled out a knife and stabbed Sapir in the back in the heat of the fight. Despite the stab wound, Sapir drew a pistol from his holster and shot the aggressor below the chest. Hesham Hedayat calmed down for good and soon died of a gunshot wound to the abdomen, as an autopsy revealed. A lone vehicle was found parked near the terminal where the shooting occurred, the Bradley Terminal. It was presumed to be the vehicle the perpetrator drove to the airport. A special unit checked the car, but it was not booby-trapped. In general, the police were mobilized because of the potential for other terrorist attacks on the 4th of July. All police officers who were not on leave acted. A strict security regime was introduced. The terminal was immediately closed. All people were evacuated from it. 20 international flights were suspended and more than 6,000 people could not leave in time. But by the evening after 16 hours, the terminal resumed its work. Additional police units were working at the airport. Hesham Hedayat's residence in Irvine was searched. Police investigators also interviewed his family and friends to ascertain his intentions. There was no information about any conflicts Hedayat had with anyone prior to his act of aggression. Subsequently, all agreed that he was frustrated by the failure of the limousine transportation business in which he worked and personal problems, and resented Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. State security officials and then Los Angeles Mayor James Hahn said it was an isolated incident of individual terror, not a link in a chain of attacks by a group. Israeli officials viewed the incident somewhat differently. Israeli Transportation Minister Ephraim Snei said, "While there is no clear evidence that this perpetrator is affiliated with a terrorist organization, the most logical assumption is that if someone opens fire at an LL counter at an international airport, it is most likely a terrorist act. We have warnings that these terrorist organizations will try to hit Israeli and Jewish targets around the world. So we have no reason to assume that this is anything other than a terrorist act." As you can see, he admitted that he was relying only on logic and no evidence, and he did not name any specific forces, but said, these terrorist organizations. But the Israeli position was also understandable. FBI spokesman Matt McLaughlin praised the determination and speed of the guard and Officer Sapir, which led to the disarming of the perpetrator and the survival of many people who could have been killed if the guard and Sapir had hesitated. Then Governor Gray Davis said he was saddened and outraged by the incident, but urged Californians not to let the incident stop them from celebrating Independence Day. "Please continue to celebrate," he said. President George W. Bush Jr. was also notified of the airport shooting. Amos Shapira, a Tel Aviv-based spokesman for El Al, which was previously known for its strict security measures, said their airline had further increased security after the incident without elaborating. July 4, 2002 was a Thursday, past Friday, and on Friday and Saturday the Israeli airlines at Los Angeles Airport did not operate due to observance of the Jewish Sabbath. So a terrorist birthday and a U.S. national holiday triggered the fire, and then a national Jewish holiday aided the police in enforcing a strict security regime. That regime continued for several more days. On Sunday, memorial ceremonies were held for the 2 slain victims, and hundreds showed up. Rabbi Aaron Tindler, one of the speakers at Yaakov Aminov's funeral, said, "Yaakov Aminov died because he was a Jew, because a culture of hate was nurtured." There was a 2-hour service, mostly by the Israeli community, after which Aminov's family members and friends carried the coffin and body through the streets from his home to the synagogue. More than 1,000 mourners filled Yad Abraham Synagogue in North Hollywood and, with a police presence, filled the parking lot of the shopping center where the synagogue is located and where Sunday's memorial service was held. As those gathered mourned and recited the traditional Kaddish, a police helicopter flew over their heads. After the service, Aminov's casket was loaded into a waiting hearse bound for Los Angeles Airport for the same El Al flight to Israel where he was buried Monday. Relatives said they begged Aminov not to go to the airport at a time when Americans were prepared for possible attacks on the first Independence Day after September 11, 2001. Later that day, about 500 people gathered for Victoria Hinn's funeral. Among them was her lover Yaron Cohen, who held a white rose during the half-hour ceremony before the burial. You can imagine his tragedy. He was going to propose to Victoria the next day, July 5th, right after the holiday. Victoria had been working at the terminal ticket counter for only a month. Born in Israel, her family moved to the United States in 1990 when she was 13. Los Angeles Mayor James Hahn, the Consul General of Israel, and officials from El Al also attended the ceremony. Victoria Hinn's funeral and burial took on political overtones as protesters and leaders of Jewish organizations also showed up, demanding that the crime be declared an act of terrorism. The funeral was first held in a small chapel in Eden Memorial Park in Mission Hills, then Victoria was buried in a cemetery in suburban Los Angeles. As the casket was carried from the chapel to the gravesite, some in attendance held banners with the words, "Stop this terrorism now." The Israeli consul at the service criticized the Muslim community for not speaking out and condemning the Islamist murders. There were fears in the Muslim community that the July 4th shooting could revive the anti-Arab discrimination that occurred after the previous year's September 11th. Sabiha Khan, a spokeswoman for the Council on American-Islamic Relations, said, "We are horrified by what has happened. We pray for the victims and their families because no one should ever die like this. We hope people can tell the difference between one crazy person and a whole community of 6 or 7 million people in the United States." The killer's wife, Hala Mohammed Sadek Elawadli, who was also 41, did not believe her husband was guilty at first and thought it was a misunderstanding because of the post. 9/11 hatred of Islam and Arabs in America. She said her husband called her a few hours before the event. He always called at that time in the morning, and there was no hint that he was going to do anything special. Hesham called me on July 4th, which was his birthday. His voice was very beautiful. He asked about the boys and asked me to take them often and check their lessons with them to be ready for the next school year. Hala Elawadli added that she has not yet told her sons what happened, so she does not wear black yet and is happy that her sons do not speak Arabic well, do not understand Arab media reports or the conversations of other Arabs around them, but her eldest son Omar asks her why their father's name is so often heard around them. In 2012, on the 10th anniversary of the tragic event, a memorial to the victims was unveiled. Among others, Klaus Hackel, who was LAL's head of department at the airport in 2002, Israeli Consul General Danny Gadot, and Avi Hinn, the father of the victim Victoria Hinn, attended the unveiling. Second case, November 1, 2013. Paul Anthony Scientia was a generation younger than his predecessor Hesham Hedayat, born in 1990, and was a Native American. He grew up in Pennsville Township in Salem County, New Jersey. His father kept his auto repair shop there, where his son worked at first. The township's police chief and neighbors assured that the Scientia family was normal and friendly. It is not known whether Paul heard about the 2002 shooting at Los Angeles International Airport when he was 12 years old, but we can assume that he did. It was a high-profile event, covered by the national media, and a 12-year-old boy living on the opposite side of the country might well have heard about it. If so, did he know then that 11 years later he would attempt something similar himself? In 2008, Paul graduated from Salesianum Roman Catholic School for Boys in Wilmington, in neighboring Delaware. He later moved to Los Angeles, to the Sun Valley neighborhood known for its predominantly young population and racial diversity. At the time of the crime, Paul Scientia was an unemployed auto mechanic. There is no evidence that he was any different from his peers during his childhood and adolescence. The weirdness began afterward. In late October 2013, a few days before the crime, Paul began asking his roommates to drive him to the airport without telling them exactly what day to do it. He told them that, allegedly, his father was sick and he wanted to fly to New Jersey. And so, on Friday, November 1st, He broke into the room of one of his roommates and demanded that he do it now. Overwhelmed by this pressure, the neighbor was forced to drive Paul to the airport. The neighbor was unaware of Paul's true plans. Around the same time, Paul sent his brother, who was staying with his family in New Jersey, a message saying that he wanted to commit suicide and stopped contacting him. This alarmed his family, and his father called Pennsville Police Chief Alan Cummings, reported the strange message from his son, and repeated unsuccessful attempts to contact him and asked for help in locating him. Cummings refused to take a missing persons report immediately, citing Paul's age, but called his colleagues at the Los Angeles Police Department. They sent a police car to the house where Paul Ciancia was renting a room. The call from Cummings came in at 10:06, and the car arrived at Paul's house 6 minutes later. He wasn't home. 2 roommates said they saw him yesterday, and he was fine. The cops drove away without making a report because the guy had been gone for a short time and could still come back, and it had not been determined where he was or if anything bad had happened to him. Just informing his brother about the suicide and the short absence was not enough. What the police did not know was that less than an hour before they arrived at Paul Ciancia's home, he had started shooting at people at the international airport. It started at about 9:20 a.m. After arriving at Terminal 3 of the airport with his roommate, Ciancia got out of his black Hyundai car and headed toward the terminal. He was carrying a bag containing a Smith & Wesson Man P-15 semi-automatic rifle in .223 caliber, 530-round magazines, and boxes of hundreds of rounds of ammunition. As he approached the Transportation Security Administration checkpoint, Ciancia shot Officer Gerardo Hernandez, who was standing there, at point-blank range. He then walked on and started to go up the escalator, but when he saw the officer moving, he returned and finished him off with rifle shots. Gerardo Hernandez was 39 years old. He was a native of El Salvador, having immigrated to the United States at the age of 15. His wife Ana Hernandez later said, he was proud of his duty to the American public and the TSA mission. They married in 1998 and had 2 children, daughter Stephanie and son Luis. Hernandez was the first TSA officer to die in the line of duty since the service was created in 2001 after the September 11th terrorist attacks. As they climbed the escalator and entered the safe air zone of Terminal 3, Ciancia started shooting and people began to scatter. Some ran to the lobby, others to the airfield exit. Others ran into the restaurant, where the staff told everyone to hide under the tables and locked the protective metal doors. But Ciancia wasn't indiscriminately shooting everyone. He was scoping out TSA officers. According to some people who described what happened, he would ask, "Are you TSA?" And if the answer was no, he wouldn't shoot, but would move on. One traveler told CNN reporter Anderson Cooper, "I just shook my head and he moved on." Upon entering the lobby and seeing the uniformed men, Ciancia attempted to shoot to kill. However, he did not kill anyone else, only wounded them. Many people ran out of the lobby through the exit to the street. 2 TSA officers were injured, 54-year-old James Spear and 36-year-old Tony Grigsby. The latter said he was helping an elderly man move to safety. "I turned around and saw an armed criminal. He shot me twice." Spear and Grigsby stayed in the hospital for a while, recovered, and were released. But because Paul Ciancia didn't have the marksmanship of a sniper or biathlete, he couldn't always hit who he was aiming at, and one ordinary person was also hurt. School teacher Brian Ludmer, 29, of Lake Forest, Illinois, was shot in the leg but recovered quickly and was in good condition 2 days later Sunday. Several other people were hospitalized with injuries caused by factors other than gunshot wounds. Movie actor and producer James Timothy Daley was at the airport at the time. He later told CNN's Brooke Baldwin that he saw, among other things, what he heard as gunfire while he was in the Virgin America first-class cabin. Calls to 911 came in shortly after Paul Ciancia's deadly activity began at 9:20, and 2 minutes later, the first LAPD officers arrived at the terminal. Her officers are armed, unlike the unarmed TSA officers. In general, American police is a conditional notion. In the U.S., there is no single police department for the whole country with a main department in the capital, as in Russia and many other countries. It is a set of police of different states, cities, and any other, which can cooperate with each other, but officially are separate independent structures. There is such a department as the Los Angeles Airport Police. It is the largest police structure in the United States, exclusively engaged in round-the-clock work at one airport and the fourth largest law enforcement agency in Los Angeles County, employing more than 1,100 people. The Los Angeles Airport Police Department works closely with the Los Angeles Police Department, but they are independent of each other. Ciancia walked the entirety of Terminal 3 and reached the food court, a restaurant at the end of the terminal area. That's where he was confronted by armed LAXPD police officers. They shot him 4 times in the chest, leg, neck, and face. The cops twisted the aggressor, but were not sure if medical personnel could safely enter the terminal, even though the nearest exit from the food court was less than 10 meters away. So Xiangxiao bled on the floor for more than half an hour. Only then was he placed in a wheelchair, handcuffed to it, wheeled outside to an ambulance, and sent to Harbor Medical Center. This is one of 2 top I-class trauma centers in Los Angeles County. The man he killed, Gerardo Hernandez, who was dead just minutes after the shooting, was also taken there. The rifle, which police pushed away from the shooter, lay on the floor next to the 3 magazines for a while longer and was seen by several witnesses, then police took it away. It later emerged that at the time of the terminal shooting, the 2 TSA officers guarding the area where Ciancia was walking were absent. They had gone on a break without complying with the mandatory requirement to inform dispatch if they left the scene. One of them was on his way to or from the restroom at a nearby terminal. The other was on his way to lunch but was still in his patrol area. After the dispatcher's call, they rushed to the scene, but were too late. One wonders whether, had the 2 men been on the scene at the right time, they would have fought back or been victimized like some of their colleagues, because they were unarmed. Paul Ciancia also had a note in his gym bag with ammunition that said he wanted to kill TSA officers to instill fear in your traitorous minds. He called his potential victims pigs in the note. This is a typical American insult for hated categories of people. Negroes call whites pigs in response to being called monkeys. Feminists, too, have coined the acronym MCP, male chauvinist pigs. The TSA was created to secure air travel after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attack. It was clear from the content of the memo why the author was so annoyed with TSA employees. In the text, he called himself a pissed-off patriot whose constitutional rights were repeatedly violated by TSA searches, and that he held a grudge against former Department of Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano. He didn't care about the race of its officers, however. Black, white, yellow, brown, I don't discriminate. This note and the idea expressed in it transformed the shooter from a mere murderer into an ideological terrorist. In addition, the note referred to how easy it is to get a gun into the airport and mentioned fiat currency. The term comes from the Latin word fiat, which means decree, instruction, be it so. There are other definitions: fiduciary, token, credit, unsecured money. It refers to a currency not backed by gold and other precious metals, the value of which is established and guaranteed only by a decree of the authority. The definition was born in the late 19th century, when the U.S. had neither a central bank nor a gold standard. The letter also mentioned the New World Order, a conspiracy theory about a shadow world government made up of the world's elite that seeks to globalize the world. The emblem, a pyramid with an eye inscribed in a triangle at the top, called the all-seeing eye, and the Latin expression Novus Ordo Seclorum, is depicted on the $1 bill and on the back of the Great Seal of the United States. The custodian of the Great Seal is the U.S. Secretary of State, and it can be seen in the State Department's exhibit hall in Washington, D.C. A security official said that the rifle used to shoot the killer was bought in Los Angeles, and that in addition to the rifle, Ciancia had 2 pistols that he also bought in Los Angeles, but which were not at the crime scene. The official said the purchases themselves were legal. He didn't buy them on the street. He didn't buy them online. He bought them from a licensed gun dealer, a rifle and 2 handguns. The FBI served a search warrant at Ciancia's family home in New Jersey. Police officers arrived there, conducted a search, and interviewed people. They found no evidence of Paul Ciancia's possible prior crimes or any conflicts he had with TSA officers. They also found out that he himself had never applied for a job with the agency. As we can see, Paul Ciancia's crime cannot even be called a mass murder, since only 1 person was killed, and a mass murder requires at least 3 or 4 murdered victims. It turns out that Hesham Hedayat is not a mass murderer either, since the number of 2 killed is also below that threshold. But there is a fine line being walked here because there was an attempt to kill a lot of people, and the wounded could have become the killed. For this reason, the more streamlined term used in the U.S. lately is mass shooting, a mass shooting, regardless of how many were killed and how many injured. Separate definitions exist for such frequent variants of mass shootings as, for example, school-college shootings. There are such subspecies of mass murderers as spree killer or rampage killer. In Russian translation, drunken, chain, furious, active shooter, and others. Xiangsha's behavior led to the collapse of almost the entire airport. The incident affected more than 1,500 flights and more than 170,000 passengers. In such a case, there is always the assumption that this is a large-scale sabotage, that there may be other shooters lurking on the airport grounds, and that explosive devices may be planted. Los Angeles Airport police evacuated people from several terminals. Canine handlers with dogs checked cars and garages connected to the terminals by pedestrian bridges. The Federal Aviation Administration delayed all departing flights, and 2 runways were closed. Over 300 people were transferred to the Tom Bradley terminal for questioning and rechecked at the exit. Incoming flights were diverted by airlines to other airports. In all, airlines canceled arriving and departing flights 236 on the day of the attack, Friday, and 27 on Saturday, with another 919 flights delayed over the 2 days. But the airport returned to normal operations as early as Monday, November 4th. Then on Monday, New Jersey Attorney John Jordan read a statement from the killer's relatives, the Ciancia family. "We are shocked and stunned by the tragic events of last Friday. It is very important for us as a family to express our deep and sincere sympathy to the Hernandez family. By all accounts, Officer Hernandez was an exemplary member of the law enforcement community and a good family man. Our sincere sympathies go out to his family and the many others who are mourning his passing. We also want to express our hope for a quick and full recovery for those who were injured during this incident. We also regret the inconvenience being experienced by thousands of travelers, as well as the Los Angeles Airport Authority and employees." The address included words about his son and brother. "We will continue to love and care for Paul. We will support him through the difficult times ahead. While we do not intend to minimize the grief and suffering that other families are experiencing, we hope the public will understand that this is a very difficult time for our family as well." One of the consequences of the incident has been a renewed debate about the need to arm TSA officers with firearms. This position had its detractors, who argued that there are already hundreds of armed police officers present at all major airports across the country, and arming any more people would not likely have prevented the incident. Indeed, this is not the only factor. Other security flaws have been identified. An 83-page report published in March 2014 pointed to communication problems and poor coordination, to the fact that lower-level employees were not trained in evacuation and did not know what to do or how to help passengers, and acted chaotically. The report also contained about 50 emergency recommendations, including a recommendation to train airport police in tactical medicine and to train medics to enter more dangerous areas in a timely manner under the protection of armed police officers. Michael McCall, chairman of the Texas House Homeland Security Committee, said Sunday on CNN that what happened shows how difficult it is to protect people at a major airport like Los Angeles International Airport. The terminals are open and easily accessible to thousands of people who approach the large sliding glass doors through a wide ring road that runs in front of the building and is designed to move people quickly. McCool said, "It's like a mall outside the perimeter. It's almost like an outdoor mall." On March 28 and May 29, 2014, 2 meetings of the Transportation Security Subcommittee of the House of Representatives Security Committee took place during the meetings of the 113th U.S. Congress. A large transcript of these meetings, titled Lessons from the LAX Shooting, has been published online. The officials said a lot of things. In particular, it was correctly pointed out that if Paul Ciancia had not targeted only TSA officers, there would have been many more victims. The 2002 case was also recalled. In addition, the Gerardo Hernandez Act was rejected in the 113th Congress meetings, and then, on the second attempt, the Gerardo Hernandez Act was passed in the 114th Congress in 2015. This law requires all U.S. airports with Transportation Security Administration employees to conduct outreach, implement, and monitor all security measures, Provide the necessary technical assistance to verify that such airports have individual work plans in place to respond to security incidents within the airport perimeter, including threats of mass murder and terrorist attacks and threats targeting passenger screening checkpoints. Identify experiences that exist at various airports and provide the necessary technical assistance to ensure that such airports have individual work plans in place to respond to security incidents within the airport perimeter, including threats of mass murder and terrorist attacks and threats targeting passenger screening checkpoints. What about Paul Scientia himself? The next day, November 2nd, 2013, while he was in the hospital, charges were filed against him for killing a federal officer and committing an act of violence at an international airport. At the state level, he was also charged with the attempted murder of 2 other officers who suffered gunshot wounds. On November 19th, Scientia was discharged from the hospital and immediately taken into custody by the U.S. Marshals, the U.S. Marshal Service. On December 5th, he made his first court appearance at the West Valley Detention Center in Rancho Cucamonga, California. He had bruises on his face, a bandage around his neck, and shackles on his hands and feet. He was taken into custody without the possibility of bail because he posed a danger to the community. On December 17th, a federal grand jury indicted him on 11 counts, including first-degree murder. This raised the possibility that Scientia could have been sentenced to death if convicted. He did not plead guilty to first-degree murder at the December 26th court hearing. A confession would have greatly increased the likelihood of a speedy death sentence. On March 3, 2014, under the judge's order, Scientia was moved from a treatment facility at the San Bernardino County Jail to the Metropolitan Detention Center Federal Detention Center. Over the next 2.5 years, several more court hearings took place, during which prosecutors decided to seek the death penalty for Paul Scientia. On September 6, 2016, he pleaded guilty in exchange for a life sentence. On November 7th of that year, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole plus 60 years and sent to prison in Allenwood, Pennsylvania, adjacent to his native New Jersey, where he remains to this day.